Context of White Supremacy, Gus T Renegade and Justice in for another program to share constructive information about racism, what it is, and how it works. Thank you, everyone, for tuning into the broadcast. I hope it is a constructive use of your time and energy. Wanted to make sure that I announced for folks there will be a second broadcast today. We will be doing a final commentary on Aaron Magruder's The Boondocks. The program will air at, it'll be a late show. It will air at 2 a.m. Eastern, 1 a.m. Central, and 11 p.m. Pacific. But that will air today, August 1st. We will air addressing the Boondocks. If you would like a link for this evening's episode, just shoot me an email, untiljustice@gmail.com. Again, untiljustice@gmail.com. But looking forward to another broadcast on the Boondocks. Our guest for today's program, I found out about her, Mr. Jenks Morton, his documentary film, What Black Men Think. He did some research with her. I saw some of the extra clips where they were going over information, and did some more research, and I saw that she had authored a book that I felt would be very interesting for us to discuss on today's program. She is a visiting scientist at the National Science Foundation, psychology professor at Howard University. The book that she authored is Black Men in Interracial Relationships, What's Love Got to Do with It? Very interesting book, and we're super grateful that she was willing to spend some of her Sunday afternoon with us. Our guest for today's program, Dr. Kellina M. Craig-Henderson. Dr. Craig-Henderson, are you with us?
I sure am. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for visiting with us. Appreciate it so much. For our listeners, if they have not read your book and if they're not familiar with your work, could you give them a little bit more background information about what you do and your area of expertise?
Sure, I'd be happy to. I'm actually trained as a social psychologist, so my background has involved looking at research questions that try to come up with answers to problems having to do with racism and gender inequity. I've done some work exploring some of the reactions to domestic violence and a host of other kinds of research projects over the years. I am still affiliated with Howard University, but I have come on board in a more permanent capacity with the National Science Foundation now, and I manage the program in social psychology there and provide guidance for researchers looking for grant money to conduct research there. And so the book that you mentioned is one that was a very long and effortful project that I took on several years ago, and was very excited to see it to completion in a book form. You there?
Yes, ma'am. I'm just listening intently. Wow. I know our listeners, this is a topic that comes up frequently on this broadcast. And always people are real interested in hearing different views on so-called interracial relationships.
Right.
Looking forward to hopping right into your material. Before I get started, I guess for folks, if they have not seen you, you are a black female. Is that correct?
That's right. Mm-hmm. Yes, I am. I am an African-American woman, and that is how I identify myself. Okay. And I should say, if I can, just a note about my interest in this topic came from personal experiences, and I can say very briefly, and I actually detail this in the book. It is a personal anecdote, but it was one that was life-changing in many ways. I had a friend who was also an African-American woman who was also a professor at a university. This was prior to coming to Howard. I was a professor at a school in the Midwest, and African American professors there were few and far between in number. And there wasn't a new black male professor who joined the engineering department during the time I was there, and he was quite attractive and quite visibly African American. And he gave another colleague of ours who was a white woman that let me say that she was approaching him to arrange a blind date between my friend and him because she knew my friend and she knew him, and she thought that they'd make a great couple. And she prefaced her remarks in that way to him, and she was told, said that he had no interest in meeting a black woman, and he had nothing in common with black women, and he proceeded to ask her out for a date. And that experience really struck a chord with me. And I realized that I, like many other African American women, had questions about black men's involvement in interracial relationships. And I said, well, rather than just sit around and speculate, I actually had the skills and the tool set to do a study and come up with some answers to these kinds of questions. And that's what launched that project and the book.
You you beat me to the punch. I also was very fascinated with the anecdote about Paul, I believe is the name you gave me in the book.
Yes, that's who it is, yeah. Yep.
I'm sorry?
No, I'm sorry I beat you to the punch, but that, for me, people often ask, first off, it's like, well, why are you so interested in that? And assuming something about me, but I just wanted to put it out there as to what initiated my interest in the topic. It was a personal matter.
Wow. Yes. Thank you for sharing. I'm glad you got it out already. I also wanted to point out one of my listeners in the Bay Area. If you would like to use your Skype account, no problem. I will have to dial you in, but it doesn't matter. If you want to call in, no problem. If you want to use Skype, that's fine too. This program, the C.O.W.S, an acronym, it is for Context of White Supremacy.
Right.
I have unfortunately concluded that you talk in your book about the just dismal incarceration rates for black males. The 68.6 is the life expectancy for black males, 68.6 years, which is extremely low for folks who don't have a frame of reference. And the whopping unemployment rate for black people and black males in particular. I have concluded that what is responsible for all of those just disgusting statistics is the system of white supremacy, and the definition that I use for both racism and white supremacy is as follows: a global system of people who classify themselves as white and are dedicated to abusing and or subjugating everyone in the known universe whom they classify as not white. Do you believe that such a system exists, and do you think that definition is accurate?
I think that that there continues to be a system, a global system, which privileges whites over people of color. And I do want to take issue too with one point, and I'll note my agreement with your definition in a moment. But and that is the term that you use, and I recognize its usefulness, and it's a handy term, but it's off-putting because I think of it the analogy of being like a male female, and I don't think of myself as a non-male. And when you say non-whites, I'd rather use the term, and I do, people of color, because I think it's more representative of the billions of people out there who are not privileged by the system of white supremacy, to use your terms. I do think that that definition is I might refine a part of it to adjust the part that refers to the you said people who are dedicated, and I think that what that does is it leaves out those individuals who participate in the system of white supremacy.
Dr. Craig-Henderson, you're breaking up a little bit.
I'm losing you. Say that again. Hello?
I said you are breaking. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, but you were breaking up. So is it my phone?
Yes, you were breaking up a little bit. I was having a tough time hearing you.
Okay, is that better?
Yes, I can hear you now. I didn't hear your response, though. I want to make sure that we do get a chance to hear what you said. So if you wouldn't mind, could you kind of rewind back to where you said you would refine
the definition of white supremacy. I was
yes.
suggesting that the definition that you gave me was one that, in my mind, includes those people who have a conscious awareness. You're suggesting that they're dedicated to, I don't have the exact wording here, but that's part of what you said, that they're dedicated to this system. And for me, that sort of leaves out of the mix all those people who, in fact, are privileged by white supremacy, who they themselves are oblivious to the system in terms of being conscious of it. So that's where I might refine the definition somewhat, because I do think that white supremacy is a reality. It is a continued reality in our global world. I just got back from a trip from Israel, actually Thursday night, and I enjoy traveling around the world, and I usually do so on business and try to get some pleasure while I'm in different places too. But all that is to say that I have had an opportunity to see how this system of white supremacy does operate in all parts of the world that I've had an opportunity to visit. I had some conversations with an African American woman who lives there now, and she was able to share with me her observations about the differences in treatment of people on the basis of skin color in a country like Israel, where everyone is homogeneous in that they are Jews. And to outsiders, you say, oh, they're Jews. What are they distinguishing amongst themselves for? But in fact, there are real differences that fall out along the lines of skin color, and that is very reminiscent of the kinds of color color problems we have here in the States and around the world. So my understanding is that wherever Europeans have effectively colonized in the world, you have these residual psychological effects among the people of color there who often equate what is good and what is right with what is white.
Wow. Yeah, I appreciate you sharing in detail very much. That's what I enjoy about the broadcast. And I did want to say a lot of guests at this point have raised the same issue that you did about the term non-white,
yes.
for the term person of color or people of color. And it's valid. Everything that you said, it's totally valid. The reason that I use the term non-white is because I've concluded that the system of white supremacy, what that means is that white is the standard, unfortunately, and that anyone who is not white, who deviates from that standard, is less than, is subordinate, even less than human. In fact, that's what the system of white supremacy does. It dehumanizes everyone who is not white, and especially individuals who are furthest from white, black people, African Americans.
Double whammy.
Do you think that's accurate?
I think so. I mean, I understand your point, and I thank you for clarifying that. And yeah, I mean that's how the system operates. It is something, though. I think that I mean, it's worth noting that there are differences in the system as it operates now with say 40 years ago. I guess that's obvious probably, but I think it's worth noting that. And I am reminded of the scholar and sociologist Joe Fagan. Are you familiar with his work at all?
Joe Fagan has been a guest on this program.
Oh, great. I didn't know that. Yeah. So, so that's, I mean, his work comes to mind. I didn't know he was a guest on the program. He's somebody who I admire.
He admitted to being a racist, white supremacist on the program, and he agreed with the definition. It's unfortunate that it exists, but he thought that was an accurate definition when he spoke with us.
Okay.
Anyone listening, Joe Fagan, he was here in March. Go back in the archives. He was here in March. We had a pretty interesting chat. We discussed his book, Two-Faced Racism. Excellent read, anybody. Group, we want to get to your book, which is also an excellent read, Black Men in Interracial Relationships. My co-host, Justice, she is with us, and I believe she has some questions she would like to ask as well. Justice, if you have some questions you would like to ask Dr. Craig-Henderson, your line is open. You should be ready to roll.
Do you say white supremacy?
Hello? Say that. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Oh, do you say white supremacy?
What do you mean? In the book, have I mentioned that?
I didn't read the book, so I just wanted to ask you, do you say white supremacy?
Do I say it? Well, I mean, in the book, I don't recall using that terminology. I may have, but I don't. It doesn't come to. I don't know. I can't remember whether I use that terminology. In the book, I do talk about the extent to which our society within the United States is one that privileges whites and upholds, for example, white womanhood as the standard for womanhood. So whether I explicitly use that term or not, I think it's certainly brought to mind in the discussion. Yes.
Okay. How do you think your book is constructive in working against racism and white supremacy?
That's a good question. I think perhaps it can be illuminating for individuals who may themselves be interested or engaged in interracial relationships to understand that they are, in fact, occurring against a backdrop of relationships in our society. I think people often feel that their relationship is a personal matter, and that is true, but up to a certain point, whether you like it or not, it becomes a political matter when it is a relationship that takes place in a society for which racial status matters. And so, yes, you may be a lone person and you may be in love with another person and you are two individuals having your own private relationship. Nevertheless, if it is an interracial relationship, the fact of the matter is it's one occurring against a backdrop of racism in our society that privileges whites against people of color, and consequently the relationship is in fact a political matter, whether you choose to recognize it as such or not. And I think that my book might be constructive in helping people to see that, to see the way that the interracial relationship is in fact part of a larger system.
How did you learn about racism and white supremacy?
Oh, that's a good question too, I guess. As an African American woman in the United States, I did not grow up in a vacuum. So there unfortunately are opportunities to observe different treatment or different reactions that people may have to others on the basis of their skin. I think it takes a certain kind of maturity to become sensitive to that, obviously. And I was fortunate enough to grow up in the metropolis of New York. the borough of Brooklyn and for the most part, and some of Manhattan. So I did not really become sensitized to the problem of racism, probably not until I went away to college. And so my first real conscious awareness came from being educated formally, but I think following that, I did, in fact, have my own, experiences. I can recount one experience. Some years later, I was in graduate school, and I was in New Orleans at the time. And everyone likes to go to New Orleans because it's the old South, and this obviously was before Katrina, but I know that people still have a fondness for the city because there is this nostalgia about the way that things used to be. And part of what never quite sat right with me was the way that African Americans in the city were disproportionately employed in menial positions throughout the city. And often in tourist settings, they tended to engage the white tourists in this kind of old, what I think of as plantation-type banter, and that was some, that was troubling to me. Anyway, I had an experience one evening where I was verbally harassed by some young whites because I had made a comment in a restaurant about them having a dog in the restaurant, and the patron at the restaurant was petting the dog while serving the food, and I asked her to clean her hands, and they did not like that, and so they harassed me and chased me out of the restaurant, asking me who did I think I was as a black person, being demanding to a white person, and that was really frightening to me because I was alone and it was in the evening. So that was an experience I had many years ago, and I don't have to sit here and go, count off the different things because I'm sure other people have, other kinds of experiences too. But my point is that I was fortunate enough to be sheltered, having grown up in this period of time and in that city, not to have direct reminders of racism, and did not become aware of it until a formal education, and then following that had some personal experiences.
Wow. Why do you not say white supremacy in your book?
Say that again. Why do I not say it in my book? I guess because I was looking. This is a study that, I should say that it is an empirical project, which means that I did employ systematic research methods, and I was trying to make this a project that had some scientific rigor, and for that reason, it was quite narrow in scope, and the sample size itself was quite small, and so. As a psychologist, we tend to focus on the internal variables that describe behavior or explain behaviors. So we look at things like attitudes and motives and emotions and cognitions. And perhaps if I were leaning a little bit more towards the sociological end of my training and donning the cap of a sociologist more readily, I might have drawn more from those kinds of global theories like white supremacy, for example. But I think that the absence of including that term, it didn't come to my mind at that point, and part of that is because of the emphasis on the psychological. And certainly, now talking to you, I can certainly acknowledge the way that the individual psyche is influenced by the greater system in which one lives and finds themselves. But that's not a term that came to mind for me in this project.
Okay, that'll be all for now. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Again, Dr. Craig-Henderson, Dr. Kellina M. Craig-Henderson of the National Science Foundation. I really appreciated you sharing that the importance of realizing that these interracial relationships in a system of racism, white supremacy, that they are political. I think we've had quite a few guests who have been on the program, non-white people who have been people of color, who've been involved in sexual relationships with white people, and they have, I think, made comments that would suggest that they don't think of these relationships as being political. They think of them as being personal and kind of outside the bounds of the system of white supremacy. And I don't agree with that.
Well, I think, that's the thing that it's really interesting, because it strikes me as, there are a lot of people over the years who have contributed, who have worked tirelessly to combat racism, and yet have they themselves been involved in interracial relationships because they see them as being separate. So I recognize that people do differ in that regard. Some of the early 1960s civil rights activists, and I'm talking about black men for the most part, African American males who were engaged in trying to push forward the race, if you will, where they themselves were involved with white women, and that continues to be the case today in terms of some individuals who are prolific writers in this area, who are very sensitive to racial issues and race discrimination. And it is a challenge. There is a writer who, I think her name is Karen McLaren. I might be blanking on one of those names. That may not be her first name, but she wrote an interesting piece in, I think it was the Times or the Post a couple of years ago. I actually mention it in my second book, which I just give a plug to very quickly, which will be out in October, on black women in interracial relationships. And she notes that she talks at length about her own personal interracial relationship, and that she got to a point where she realized that she could not be with a white person while she was grappling with the problem of racism, and that it was almost like a light went off in her head at some point, and she had to end the relationship. And it was a pleasant relationship, and it was somebody who she really seemed to click with, and yet I think her quote was that a black person who is grappling with racism cannot be involved with a white person who doesn't or doesn't get it, or something like that. And I would go so far as to say that, on some level, it would be challenging to be involved in that relationship, period, no matter how, committed your partner might be, if you are somebody who is, sensitive to the problem of racism in our society. I think on some level you have to kind of put that on the back burner if you are a black person and you are in an interracial relationship. You got to compartmentalize your life, and you have to decide how you're going to think about the problems in our society that are connected to racism, or you might just decide that you're just not going to think about them because it can be, psychologically dissonant, I think.
Wow. I am mildly stunned. That doesn't happen too often on the program. Could you share, I guess, a little bit with regards to why you feel like it can be such a problem if you are a black person and you're in a sexual relationship with a white person, why you need to kind of put that on the back burner? Like, even if you're with a white person and they understand, yes, we're in a system of racism, white supremacy, I understand you're mistreated all over the world, all areas of people activity, why you feel that's important to maybe look at putting that on the back burner?
Well, I guess my point was that in order to be able to be psychologically healthy and to feel good about yourself and to feel good about your relationship, there's got to be some kind of consistency. And if you're with somebody who for you represents a system of privilege that you're not part of, that can be problematic. And so what I was suggesting is that it may be that if you decide that the relationship is worth it and it wins out for you, then you have to put your concerns about the pervasive problem of racism. You're going to have to put those on the back burner, because it's not going to be easy to, or even maybe even possible in the long run, to juggle with your conscious awareness and reminder of the fact of racism with the fact of your relationship. That was my point. I have an example of an individual who I interviewed for my second book, who was an African American woman, and she talked about a relationship she'd had for her first marriage actually was to a white guy who she said that the problems that they had were, this is in hindsight, this is what she's attributing to some of the demise of the relationship to, that she'd come home from work talking about racial things that were going on, because they were stressful and they were problematic. And he couldn't really relate or deal with it. And it was a problem, because she couldn't share a part of her that was, it was a part of her that was right up in front of her face, because things weren't going well. And maybe it would have never come up if she had been employed in another setting and this were not characteristic of the work environment she was in. But that was her reality at that time. And it just so happened that when confronted with that, the man that she was with was unable to really to deal with that, and it was one of those irreconcilable differences, I think, in the relationship. So that's what I mean. I mean, it really does depend on the individual themselves and how conscious they're going to be. I mean, being aware of racism 24/7, as you know, can be tiring and debilitating, and thinking about it can be it can weigh you down. So it may well be that for some individuals, kind of turning their head away from it and thinking to themselves, hey, this is obviously a sign of progress, the fact that I'm able to be in this interracial relationship. Maybe I shouldn't be so concerned about the problems of racism, because that's something that you haven't brought up yet, but is certainly part of the rationale, I think, for some people, that, hey, we're in a time today where you can be in an interracial relationship and not be lynched as a black person. That's a sign of progress for many people. So whether you agree with that or not, the point that I'm making is that it really does depend on where your head is at, I think, as an individual.
Wow. Again, our guest for today's program, Dr. Kellina M. Craig-Henderson. I'm hopping around a little bit, just enjoying the dialogue. You brought up, and you talk about this in your book, that's why I'm okay hopping around, the number of black males in particular who were sexually involved with white people and also working against racism, white supremacy. And in your book, you talk specifically about Eldridge Cleaver, who was in the Black Panther Party, went to jail. He wrote Soul on Ice. We touched on that book before. But you mentioned one of the poems that he wrote where he's talking about rape as an insurrectionary act. And I wanted to get your thoughts. For listeners who haven't read the book, I want to give them the poem really quick because it's short.
Yeah.
To a white girl, I love you because you're white, not because you're charming or bright. Your whiteness is a silky thread snaking through my thoughts in red-hot patterns of lust and desire. I hate you because you're white. Your white meat is nightmare food. White is the skin of evil. You're my Moby Dick, white witch, symbol of the rope and hanging tree, of the burning cross, loving you thus and hating you so, my heart is torn in two, crucified. Can you kind of share your thoughts both on the poem and this seeming contradiction, talking about this insurrectionary act?
Right, and also just to give the listeners a little bit more context too of the that passage and Cleaver's acknowledgement of that motivation. He also notes, I think in that same section of the book, I can't remember and I don't have it in front of me, that he was raping sisters in the hood as well at that time. He was angry, and I think that I used him in my book as an example of the relationship type that I characterized as the rebellion. I think that's what I did. Yeah, the rebellion. When I studied this sample of African American men, I came up with a kind of typology, if you will, of different kinds of relationships, just based on what I got out of the conversations I'd had with the men and what I'd read prior to doing this study. And so the rebellion is, I think, the kind of relationship that one might engage in to get back at something or someone else or something greater than themselves. And so for Cleaver, I think part of what he's doing in describing this motivation was, striking out at the man, the white man's society and system of privilege by attacking white women. And in terms of everyday folks today, I think that there are people who may pursue interracial relationships because there is something exciting about this kind of rebellious or rebellion. If you know that the people who are part of your social network or maybe even your family are opposed to somebody from that particular racial group, and you want to get back at them, or you want to live dangerously, you may in fact pursue a relationship with somebody from a different racial group because you kind of get excited by the eyebrows that are raised or the illicitness of the relationship. And so I think that that's part of it. The other part of that poem has to do with the thing that I think I implied earlier on, which is the pervasiveness of the standard of virtue and beauty and womanhood in our society that says that what is right is better and more beautiful and more womanly and more virtuous. And so by attacking a white woman, one can psychologically feel that they're attacking that wrong or inaccurate stereotype in our society, I think. So that's important to point out too, that no matter how much progress we may have made, and of course that's something that people probably debate, but I am one to say that I think that we have made some progress, certainly in our society. I think it's impossible not to acknowledge that. At the same time, I realize that there are some real serious problems that are, related to a system of privilege that puts people of color at disadvantage. And one of those things is connected to our perceptions of or ideals about what is beautiful and what is good. And it continues to be what is closest to whites or Europeans.
I want to check to see if Justice has some more questions, but when it's my turn to ask again, I have Linda Carter on the front
website.
page.
Yeah, I see that. She's on the website. Yeah, I saw that.
I want to make sure that we cover why that's relevant to what we're discussing.
Right.
Justice, you have some questions? Please go right ahead.
If a white person is trying to mistreat you or is mistreating you, what should you do or say when that happens or is happening?
I guess it depends on the kind of relationship. If you're talking about a personal an intimate relationship versus somebody at work versus somebody in your class. The kind of relationship will probably dictate the specific kind of response, but I guess the overall common denominator would be to stop it, to do what you can to stop it. Now, of course, that's going to depend on whether that person's your employer and you need your job, or a classmate and you're doing a research project with them, or I guess if you're in an interracial relationship, it could happen too. So really, I think that the answer to that question would have to be one that would be specific to the kind of relationship that you have. If you are, for example, in a workplace and you recognize that you are being unfairly treated and it's a racial issue, then you need to communicate with your EEOC office, your Equal Employment Opportunity, Council's office, or whatever the comparable name is at work. And if there's not one there, then you might need to look outside of work and contact the local Equal Employment Opportunity Commission office. I mean, there are different strategies that one would want to employ that are going to be related to the kind of the specific situation that you're in. But by all means, I mean, I think that the common reaction should be one of putting a stop to it and taking it from there.
Okay. When white people mistreat non-white people, what are some of the things non-white people can do or say to deal with the stress?
I guess again, I hate to say it depends, but it will depend on how they mistreat them. And so are we talking something verbal? Somebody says something to you. I talked about a situation that I experienced many years ago where somebody said something to me and then they sort of chased me down the street. My response in that situation was to say, heck yeah, I'm speaking up for myself. I don't know who you think I am, but yes, I am speaking up for myself, and I have a right to. And then my next response was to run. Okay, so that's what I did. I ran because I was alone, and it was in the dark, and there were a group of people. It was a group of people. That's one kind of response. On the other hand, if it's something at work and your employer says something that's a racially derogatory statement to you, you probably need to think about the power that they have over you in terms of your job security, and you need to give that some thought in terms of whether to speak directly to them and say, hey, I don't really appreciate that remark, or whether you want to instead file it away and then go to EEO and the Equal Employment Opportunity office and register a complaint there. That could be one strategy. On the other hand, if it's a classmate who is on the same level as you, a peer, for example, I think that explicitly acknowledging your discomfort with it is probably a useful strategy because it'll get the issue out there. It may be uncomfortable initially, and some of us are more comfortable or uncomfortable, I should say, with confrontation than others. But if it's a peer and you're in a safe environment, then I think that it certainly can be useful to make this a dialogue and to explain and educate in that particular moment when it happens.
Okay, that'll be all for now. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Context of white supremacy, our guest, Dr. Kellina Craig-Henderson. We have Wonder Woman on the front page for the program. We also have the Predator on the front page.
Ah, that's the Predator. Okay, yes.
I thought that was... you do have the Predator listed in your typology. I guess we'd start right there. Can you tell them about the Predator?
Oh, yes. Actually, you're right. Thank you very much. So I knew I was struggling to remember how I characterized Cleaver, And I actually, he was actually the predator. That's who I'm just blanking on that. I characterized him as the predator, and the reason why it's a little fuzzy in my mind is because I even mentioned this in the book. Fortunately, I did not come across any men who I interviewed personally that I would feel comfortable characterizing as predators. And I'm happy to say that. That of the 30-some-odd men I talked to, 25 of whom I record the responses to in this book, none of them came across as being predators. But I did search to find a representative example of one, and that's when I came up with the, I include the little note about Cleaver and his poem in the book Soul on Ice. So that's why you have the predator there. That's what that was. And so I think that there are people who again, just to not to spend too much time on it because I did say a bit about it, who feel that they can strike out at a system of what they perceive as being wrong, something that has wronged them by preying on others, and that is very, very accurately depicted in that poem that you read to the listeners. That is a predator.
How would you distinguish that from the Revenge Rambo type that you talk about in the book?
Yeah, and that's actually another author's use of, that's his label, but I think that it's actually it's kind of similar. I can't remember the author, but it's somebody who I did give props to in the book because he came up with a smaller or more limited typology of, I think, 3 different types of relationship types, and the Revenge Rambo is I think consistent with the predator and to some extent the rebellion kind of guy, the person who is rebelling against society and trying to make a point, trying to say to hell with society. I did have people who I interviewed who were characteristic of the rebellion and maybe a little bit like the Revenge Rambo type. For example, there was one man I spoke to who had talked about the fact that he spent some time as a pimp, and he took he had no compunction about having employed white women as prostitutes, and he kind of got a kick out of that because of his feelings about how he had been wronged as a black man. So, one can, I think, feel comfortable characterizing that kind of motive as a vengeful one or even a rebellious one.
I want to share with listeners, Dr. Craig-Henderson, she talks with a lot of black males who are in sexual relationships with non-black partners, be it white people or a non-white person who is not black in the book, and shares some of their responses. I wanted to get to some of the other categories that you talk about in some of the individuals, specifically Derek. I thought that was just really interesting information that he shared. I think, I might be incorrect, but I think you classified him as one of the status seekers. It was either status seeker or obsessed, but could you share a little bit about Derek?
Yeah, I think he was the obsession, and and that, I think, is that the one that I mentioned who said he thought that I think that's the one that equated white womanhood with Wonder Woman, right?
Yep.
I think that's the one. Let me just turn. I have the book here, but I don't remember. Derek was, I think, the one who was married to a Hispanic woman. Is that right? Is that the one? Yeah. Yeah, here it is. He was very flattered by the interview, and I think he really didn't get it. And I felt bad for him, actually, after talking with him. I felt bad for him because he described having had experiences in his wife's now his wife, the woman he was married to, her household where family members, would use racial slurs to refer to him. And he kind of just felt that was his burden, to have to deal with that. But, for him, it was I guess the benefit of being with somebody who was not black that outweighed all of those kinds of issues that he felt he had to deal with. That he had to deal with. He didn't feel he had to deal with, but he actually had to deal with in his day-to-day life, like his, in-laws using racial slurs to refer to him. He was somebody who I didn't feel sorry for most of the men I talked to, but I sympathized with him because he just really didn't seem to get it. And he really did seem to be taken with being with somebody who was not black. And that was, that obviously is problematic for a number of reasons. But and he was a younger guy too, so perhaps some of this can be attributed to his youth. I note that he was 23. Yeah, young guy. So one would hope that with years, not too many years, but with some years and maturity, his mind would be opened up a bit. I don't know.
Wow. And he shared that when he was, I think for his first 17 years, that he thought Linda Carter was the essence of womanhood. And Linda Carter, that is Wonder Woman, the white woman that is pictured. She used to play Wonder Woman when it was a TV show. And just talk about lasting impact. I said we're doing a second program today on the Boondocks. Just, I think 2 weeks ago in the series, Grandpa, he was doing all this crazy stuff and just behaving really incorrectly. And part of his motivation, he said, was to get a woman, a white woman specifically, that looked like Linda Carter.
Wow.
He just said this 2 weeks ago on the Boondocks. Could you actually talk about that, the role that images and entertainment has in kind of pushing this warped behavior?
Yeah, absolutely, and that's powerful. I mean, I spend maybe a disproportionate amount of time in the book discussing this, and even in my second book that'll be out this fall, I do spend some time talking about the power of images in our society, cultural images that are transmitted to us through so many different media, through books, through magazines, through television, through internet, through movies. We learn very, very early on that what is white is right and better than what is not white. And better can be many things. Better can be stronger, cleaner, more attractive, richer, nicer. All of the positive attributes you can think of tend to go along with what is white. And that's the implicit message that children get very early on when they start tuning into cultural media. And as adults, we get this sometimes explicitly. It's not just implicit. There are often explicit references to. So, for example, I mentioned, I think in this book, I can't remember if it was this one or the next one, that if you look at some of the movies that have starred, that have had interracial relationships depicted by stars. Can you hear me? I thought I was breaking up. That's why I asked.
We can hear you clearly, yes.
Okay, great. That if you look at current movies over the last 10 years, a large number of the interracial relationships have involved black men, and they are with women who are, who are not black. Sometimes they look like they may be Latina, or maybe there's some kind of exotic Eastern European or something like that. But we get those kinds of relationships. And then on the flip side, increasingly we're beginning to see African American women who are getting major face time in mainstream movies, and they are being depicted with white men. So what I'm most struck by and concerned about is the absence of relationships in mainstream media that are taking place or being depicted to take place between black men and black women. They're absent. They are absent from most films, for example, and movies. So when you see top black stars, who are they with? Well, they're with mates that are not black. And that really is problematic because that's what children grow up learning, and they begin to see this. And they don't see any healthy examples. Never mind healthy, they don't even just see examples of black men being attracted to black women and black women being attracted to black men. Because if you look at all of the top movies over the last few years, the biggest black stars. Now I know that there are some stars who have taken an explicit position, and in fact I say there's some, but quite frankly the only one that I know of who has been explicit about this in several interviews has been Denzel Washington. But I know that for most other stars, they're happy to get work. So they work, and they get the job, and they are most often with somebody who isn't black. Now, Hollywood is still, I think, controlled by white men. That is, the movies that are written and produced are produced by white men, and in their mind, the hero is always somebody who looks like them. The hero is the guy who wins, who gets the girl, and who makes the lasting impression on the viewer's mind. So I think that explains why we don't see the kinds of images that I'd like to see in movies. And unfortunately, I don't think that we're able to count on the other kinds of cultural forms of media to get those images. We know that people read less. They don't read books as often as they did maybe in past years, and so we're not likely to see youth being socialized about these kinds of relationships by reading. You've got music videos, for example. That's another popular cultural forum these days that are disgraceful when it comes to transmitting positive images about black women. They're typically misogynistic, and at best, women are not really very complicated or complex individuals. So I think that there are real problems with the cultural media representations that are out there today. And if you look at magazines and print ads, many years ago I did a study just exploring the depiction of blacks and whites ads, and I looked at several magazines over a period of time, and it concluded that the changes that we see now are that you now begin to see more, not now, but this is like 20 years ago, you see more people of color in print ads, whereas 40 and 50 and 60 years ago, they were just absent. They were devoid, like they didn't exist. Now they're there, but if you do an analysis of their representation vis-a-vis whites in ads, black folks and other people of color still come up short. And they're depicted in more subordinate roles. So, we got a long way to go. I think we have a long way to go. That's the bottom line.
I could not agree more. I did want to throw out there, since you brought up Denzel Washington, I'm familiar with his film resume somewhat. I know he has had more than one film where he has been sexually involved with a white woman. Ricochet, that's one. He's actually raped by a white woman in that film. And really interesting, if you want to do some homework, listeners, He Got Game, Spike Lee film, where he ends up redeeming a white prostitute. He ends up kind of getting her back on the right track, and he kills his black wife in the film. Really? Oh,
wow. I don't even... What's that movie called? Say that again.
He Got Game. It's Denzel Washington, Jim Brown, Ray Allen.
Yeah, I don't remember that one. And that's Spike Lee?
Yes.
Yeah, I have to see that one. I didn't know that. I I'm sorry to hear that. That flies against what I had heard in an interview from him. But so there may not be anybody. If it comes down to it, I don't know of African American actors or actresses who can get mainstream movies and have that mainstream appeal, because that's what makes you a star, and have a stance, a conscious stance about how they're going to be depicted. I don't know if it can work, frankly. You would think that people who have the ability to control. So I just read, I didn't see the movie, but I read in, I think it was in the Post, they did a description of the movie The Karate Kid, which was produced by the Smiths, Will Smith and his wife, Jada Pinkett Smith, primarily so that it could be a vehicle to launch their son's independent film career. And I heard that it was, family-friendly, pleasant remake of the 80s movie. And one wonders whether they have the clout to be able to make those kinds of calls for a film. Quite frankly, I don't know them personally, but I don't get the impression that they have that consciousness to even do that. Were they able to financially have the clout to do it? So it takes a couple of things, in order for this to happen. You've got to have the clout, and then you've got to have the consciousness. And nobody comes to mind among the roster of current big name African American stars who have both those criteria in place.
Wow, unfortunate. Well, I'll check with Justice. Justice, if you have some questions you would like to ask Dr. Craig-Henderson, please go right ahead.
Have you seen non-white people protect white people? And if you have, what did you learn from that?
Have I seen black people protect white people? Is that what you said?
Yes. And if you have, what did you learn from that?
I don't know if I have. I can't. Nothing comes to mind in real life. Maybe in some movie, fictional portrayals, perhaps that's happened. But black people protecting white people. Do you have an example in mind?
If a white person is because I went to a conference in Seattle.
Yes.
So, I was there and with Matthew Jacobson, and there was this non-white person protecting this white person. He was so-called Asian.
I see what you're saying.
That's one example.
Yeah, I think that that happens from time to time, that and I guess it depends on how they see themselves and whether or not they actually see a need to be protective. But I think there may be for some people a sense of let's just get over this. Aren't we over this? Aren't we finished with this racism thing? Let's just move on. I've heard people say things like that or read comments like that, and it seems to me that if you think that that's the case and you are a person of color, then you probably would be somebody to want to run to the assistance of a white person. I could envision like a dialogue that would be an uncomfortable one, that maybe a white person would be put on the spot, perhaps, and a black person could come to their aid in that case. I can't think of any personal experiences right now, but I could certainly envision something like that happening. If it was the case that someone felt that way, felt that, we've spent enough time talking about this racism thing or this racism problem, let's move on. I know that there are people who feel that way.
Okay. What should you do or say when non-white people are protecting white people?
I guess protecting, it depends on what the situation is. If it's a life or death thing, I think it's our our responsibility as human beings to help others, regardless of what racial background they are. If somebody's, drowning or something, you want to throw them a life raft. I mean that literally. But I do think that in the context of a dialogue, probably we need to allow people to kind of man up on their own. It's hard to say. I can't really give a hard and fast rule because it really will depend on the situation. But certainly, I think it's worth allowing individuals to have the discomfort that comes from being in a situation where the spotlight is on you, just to realize that maybe what you're saying is not appropriate, not accurate, or not right in that context. So I hesitate to make a response that would characterize all those situations where this could happen, but I think it is a situation that African Americans in particular might find themselves in, and probably need to give some thought to their first impulse, which might be to run in and rescue the person who's floundering or struggling because of some remark that they've made.
If you are in a tragic arrangement with a white person, what should you say or do to prevent that mistreatment?
You say the tragic arrangement?
Yes.
In the past, this didn't come up here, but I do have some research publications in the area of hate crimes, for example, and so I think of that. That's probably an extreme, and I don't know if that's what you meant, but obviously that's that can be a life-threatening situation, and you say tragic, so that's what came to mind for me, and I think that one would want to get help and remove themselves from the situation as quickly as possible. I think that would be the first impulse I'd have, would be to get out of the situation, whether it means to physically remove yourself or to leave the room, hang up the phone, or however you can do it. I think the first impulse would be to get out of there, especially if you are at risk. Your physical well-being is at risk.
What I mean by tragic arrangement is dating.
Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah. So we've been talking about interracial relationships, and I think that people will find themselves, there will be different explanations for how people find themselves in these relationships. And based on my research, I do know that there is a cohort of people who happen to fall in love with somebody who is of another racial background. And no amount of racial strategizing or consciousness raising is going to change that for them. And that's their situation, and I think that they would never even characterize it as a tragic relationship. There are others who are on a mission to be with somebody of a different racial status because they have, I think, been brainwashed about what's good and what's right in our society. And it is those people for whom much of my commentary, I think, is directed. And I would encourage them to read up on the numbers, to look at what the statistics tell us about the well-being of African Americans as a group and African American men in particular. You can look at a number of indices of well-being in our society that, if you look at them all at once, it can be very sobering. I'm talking about indices having to do with health, the statistics on health, on education, on job opportunity, on income differentials. All of those numbers tell us that African Americans are still behind. We have not reached parity. And for African American men, the situation is particularly dire. So, my recommendation would be to educate oneself about what's going on in our greater context, and to realize that our relationships do in fact happen within a greater context. As private as we may want them to be, or as personal as we want to keep them, they do in fact have a political aspect to them.
Okay, that'll be all for now. Thank you.
Thank you.
I happened to be present with Justice when she was speaking to Matthew Fry Jacobson. He's a professor at Columbia, and he came to this neck of the woods to visit and do a talk on racism. He's the author of Whiteness of a Different Color. He's been a guest on this program.
Tell me the name of the book again. I'm sorry. What was that?
His name is Matthew Fry Jacobson, and the name of the book we discussed on this program is Whiteness of a Different Color.
Okay.
It examines how different people who were not classified as white, Irish, Italians, etc., how they eventually became classified as white, and
yes.
how a big part of that involves mistreating black people.
Right.
But when he was here, he was being questioned because he said on the program that if you are a white person, you are a racist. That's just what it means, inescapable. And when he was questioned about this in person, the discussion got uncomfortable. He didn't totally retreat from what he said, but he wasn't, in my view, he wasn't being completely honest.
Right, right.
And
it was uncomfortable.
So-called, yes, he got uncomfortable, and Justice was talking about there was an Asian person present who is married to a white woman, and he began defending this white person and attempting to get the non-white people to leave him alone and stop making this an uncomfortable discussion. And that has been something that I've observed consistently with non-white people who are sexually involved with white people. That they have a tendency to protect white people, minimize racism, white supremacy. And I guess with regards to Derek, who you said he's in this relationship, and his in-laws, his non-black white in-laws, are making racist comments towards him and making him uncomfortable.
That's right.
It's also something you have observed. Oh no, she got cut. Darn. Dang, we lost our guest. Hopefully she will dial back in so we can continue the discussion. Man, that's unpleasant. It could be suspected racist interference. Hopefully she'll dial us right back. We'll see if we can get her back on the line here. We'll wait a moment and see if we can get back. Everybody that called in, if you give me like 15 minutes, I'll go to the phone lines. A lot of folks are on the phone lines. Give me 15 minutes, and I'll get you so you can ask your questions for Dr. Kellina Craig-Henderson. And again, we will be back. Got her back right now. Good.
Sorry, there?
No problem. Yes, ma'am. We can hear you.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I have a little boy, and he just came in and interrupted the communication here. So I apologize.
No worries.
I don't know if I'll be able to stay on much longer, frankly, because I have him in my arms. He's 2, so.
Oh, wow. Right on. Moms are important. Okay, doke. We can do callers. I have great respect. Parents are important. Mommies are important. We can hit the phone lines now. Make sure I get some of the folks who called in. Christy, you're on the line. If you have a question for Dr. Craig-Henderson, go right ahead.
Hello?
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Hi, Gus. I do have a question for Dr. Craig-Henderson. Thanks for coming on the program, by the way.
Hi.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Okay. Earlier, correct me if I'm wrong, you said that it would be very difficult for a non-white person to be in a relationship with a white person unless that white person demonstrated that they were committed to ending racism. I want to ask, in your opinion, how or in what ways does a white person demonstrate that they're committed to ending racism?
Well, the first thing I wanted to say, though, is that I struggled to articulate that point, and what I was saying is that for a black person who is conscious, it's difficult to be in that kind of relationship with a white person who is not working to combat racism. Because I think that it's a lot easier if you're not conscious, frankly. That's the bottom line. And so for those who are conscious, yes, they, in order to stay in that relationship and to, to be comfortable in it, there's got to be somebody who they're with who is aware of the reality of it. And I mentioned the two examples. One was an author who had written of her experiences in the paper, and the other person was somebody I interviewed for my book. But in order, so your question is about how that white person would behave or how they work to combat racism, and I think it probably will depend on the relationship and what that person, what kinds of experiences that they're in and what kinds of opportunities they have. For example, the woman I interviewed, it would have been about having a spouse to come home to, for one, who could understand and sympathize and be there, be a good listener, and be able to say, honey, I hear you. What do you think you can do about this, that, or the other? And unfortunately, in her situation, that wasn't even there. That person was not able to do that. So that would be one thing, being able to do that. For other people, it might be having somebody who can advocate with them. I don't know, if you're in college and you're part of a student group on campus that is aimed at eliminating racism, it's probably helpful to have a partner who's also a part of that group, particularly if you're going to, be in an interracial relationship. So I think that there are ways that people navigate the problems of racism and, feel that they're doing what they can, and it's going to differ from relationship to relationship. And it will also differ on the level of consciousness that the person of color has.
Person who called in, you have a blocked number. Person who called with a blocked number. If you have a question for Dr. Craig-Henderson, your line is open.
Dr. Henderson, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, and is your book available in Barnes & Noble?
Online. You can get it online.
Okay, great. I'll look for that.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask you, I've noticed, at least online in particular, where there's a lot of promotion of interracial relationships going on,
yes.
Especially black people with white people, I have seen both black males and females who are in interracial relationships with white people be very abusive toward each other, not just individually, but black females completely trashing black males and vice versa, even to the point of dedicating entire channels on YouTube to doing so, putting up videos from divorce court, things like that, to show how, degenerate and dysfunctional the other is. And I wanted to know, did you find that in any of your studies, and what do you think is going on with them psychologically that they dedicate themselves to abusing their own people?
Yeah, I think that's a tall order that you ask, and I won't even be able to address all of it. But one thing I can say, and I think it is an important question, is in my research I did encounter, in the case of the study looking at black men, a category of men who I characterized as retreatist. And I did so because it became apparent that after talking to a few men, there was a small subset or cohort of men who had experiences with black women that really angered them to a point of wanting to turn away from all black women. And that was, enough to make them, kind of write off any and every other African-American woman in their lives. So I think that for some people there may be an emotionally strong and intense negative experience they have that may influence them. It may be feeling rejected or having been hurt terribly. It's going to differ from person to person, but I do think that it's probably at the root of it some kind of emotionally intense negative experience that they've had, that they haven't worked through effectively, and the way to deal with it for them has been to just write off an entire group of people.
Time-wise, how much longer can you hang out to take questions?
I can maybe take one more, if that's okay. I'm sorry to have to cut it short. I just, I didn't realize.
No worries.
Yeah.
No worries. Can we get you back in October when the new book comes out?
Oh, I would love it. I would be delighted, and I would look forward to talking with you again.
Oh, okay. Groovy. We'll get last caller. Non-Mighty Wick, if you have a question, your line is open.
Hello, thank you for coming on. Can I be heard?
I'm here.
Okay, I just wanted to, I guess just for clarity purposes, in the context of eliminating white supremacy, racism, as soon as possible, are you in support of interracial relationships being a factor to help get rid of racism? Are you in support of that, or no?
That's a real direct question, and I'm going to hedge the answer and say that in general, I think that people who find themselves led, who fall in love with individuals without any idea or thinking about the person's, what color their skin or their money or their background, that is up to them, frankly. I don't think that that's everyone. But again, my focus has been on individuals who have had some kind of other motives, if you will, for finding someone to be with, wanting to be with people that look a certain way or that they think are consistent with certain kinds of traits. And I think that that's different. That's different than people who happen to fall in love. And, of the people that I've interviewed, the people who just happen to fall in love tend to be a small minority of all of the other kinds of motives I identified, for better or for worse. And so I would be hesitant to say that, and this I guess is contrary to the program's message here, but I would be hesitant to rule out interracial relationships across the board and say that every one of them is a bad thing and that we can't have efforts to eliminate racism without them. I think it's a much more complicated situation we have on our hands, and I do think that it is important for individuals in interracial relationships to recognize that the relationship is part of a bigger picture and a bigger political and cultural landscape, and that we don't exist in vacuums. I think that that's important, but I can't say, I don't think it would be right for me to rule out all of those relationships.
Okay, thank you for that. Maybe your answer will remain the same, but let me be a little more specific about what I was attempting to ask. When I was talking about these relationships, I'm specifically talking about relationships or arrangements between white people and people who are not white. So not necessarily, say, a non-white person who's black with a non-white person who is so-called Hispanic or something else like that. Are you
meant
support,
white? Yeah, I understand.
White with people who are not white for the purpose of getting rid of racism, white supremacy as soon as possible.
Right. Yeah, I understood. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, good. I just had an echo. But yeah, I think my answer is the same. I'm sorry I can't be more clear, but frankly it's a little fuzzy in my mind right now, but I do want to underscore the point that I think that there are exceptions, and those exceptions are real for some people. And the exceptions in this case are those relationships that are interracial relationships that are based, purely on happenstance and love. And I know people who, and there's an example that comes to mind, actually, and I forget his name, but there's somebody who I profiled in the book who sat there and told me about how he fought with himself about being with this woman who was not an African-American woman, because he had some very strong resistance to interracial relationships, particularly in college as a younger man. And he was a member of an African-American fraternity, and he just could not envision himself being the type of black man who was with a white woman. He just couldn't and wouldn't, and he struggled. And anyway, to make a long story short, the end of the story is he married this white woman. And anyway, he talks on and on about the soul searching that he had to go through, and this, that, and the other. And so my point is that there are people for whom the relationship is it is one that they fell into. And yes, you might say, well, if you're conscious, then you should avoid those situations. Well, that's not always the case. That's not human nature, and that's not how things work. And this young man was working in an all-white environment in a town where he was one of few black people, and so on and so forth. There's a lot of excuses, but I think that it would be inaccurate or wrong to say that all those relationships are bad.
All right, thank you for your view. I appreciate that.
As I said, great respect for mommies. Want you to be able to take care of your child. Thoroughly enjoyed the book and having you on the program. And I will be pestering you around the end of September to see if we can get you back on the program to discuss the new book. I did want to ask before I got you off the phone, I was just curious, since we've been talking about this the whole program, are you now or have you ever been sexually involved with a white person?
No, my husband is an African American, and I have had experiences in college. I did go out on a date, or I do know the other side of the fence, so I'm not speaking from one side only. But my husband is African American, and my little boy is too.
Hold on. We will be looking for the book. October, you said that one is Black Women in Interracial Relationships?
Yeah, let me just tell you the full title. It's Black Women in Interracial Relationships in Search of Love and Solace. And it'll be out, I believe it's late September, early October. And it's a much better book than the first one, and part of that has to do with the fact that I was talking with black women, and it was a lot easier. The communication, the dialogue flowed. As you can imagine, talking about these issues with a group of black men as a black woman, there were some challenges, and I didn't have those challenges in the case of the women. So I think most readers, if they've read the first one, you definitely need to read the second one because it's a much better book.
Wow. We will be looking out for that end of September, early October. Dr. Kellina M. Craig-Henderson, thank you so much for sharing some of your Sunday afternoon with us.
Thanks for having me. I've enjoyed the conversation.
For sure. We will be in touch soon.
Okay. Take care.
Thank you. You too.
Bye-bye.
Context of white supremacy. I'm going to take a quick commercial break. My apologies to folks who were on the line and didn't get to ask a question. I will go to you on the other side of the commercial immediately so you can share your views or thoughts about what you heard on the program. Sorry you didn't get to ask a question. Moms are important, very important. And hopefully we'll get her back in October, so you can write it down, remember for October, and shoot when we get her back on the program. But quick commercial to support Sister Nefertari, and we'll be right back. Justice and Gus T Renegade, Context of White Supremacy.
The second annual Nat King Day Weekend Celebration 2010, The Resurrection of Haiti, Friday, August 20th to Sunday, August 22nd, at the Church of the Advocate, 1801 West Diamond Street, Philadelphia, PA, sponsored by the Children of Southampton, featuring Umar Abdullah Johnson, the Irritated Genie of Southeast, Sister Nefertari, Mary Mu Nzinga, the Universal African Dance and Drum Ensemble, the less we forget Black Holocaust Slave Museum. And a special feature, the Nat Turner Day African Insurrection Musical with Brothers Keeper, the African Marketplace, and much, much more. The cost for the entire weekend, $50 for Black adults, $25 for Black students and children under 12, and $25 for Black elders 65 and older. For more information, contact the Children of Southampton at www.ourcause.com. That's www.ourkos.com or 888-817-3235. That's toll free at 888-817-3235.
Context of white supremacy. Gus T Renegade. Justice, our guest, Dr. Kellina Craig-Henderson. Going to get the phone lines. Before I go to the phone lines, I did want to read my disclaimer, courtesy of Christy. We were talking yesterday, and she asked me a great question, and I thought it would be great to codify as we go. The opinions expressed by the guests and callers are solely those of the guests and callers, respectively. They do not reflect the views of the hosts. Context of white supremacy. I want to get the people who did not get an opportunity to ask a question first. So, Mr. Nero, got you. Mr. Nero, your line is open. Bay Area caller, and the person that's showing up is Carola. I don't know what that is. Carola. Sorry, I'm a little retarded, non-white person. Your lines are open. 818. I'll get you as soon as the folks who didn't get to ask a question. As soon as they get their view out really quick, then I'll get 818 and Christy and non-mighty way. But your lines are open, gang.
Gus, this is Mr. Nero. I didn't have a question at this time.
This is Bay Area. No questions at this time.
Okay. The other person, I don't know if you're just listening or Carola. I don't know what that is. Okay, maybe she's just listening. I will get 818. Justice and I are going to do a quick switcheroo, so you all have at it. Justice and I are going to switch really quick, which we won't be able to hear you for a moment, but we'll be right back. You all feel free to exchange views and all that good stuff. And since the guest hung up, we now have a line open. So if you want to call in to comment on anything you heard, you should be able to get through now. But feel free, 818, your line is open as well. We're going to switch lines, and I'll be right back.
Okay. I have a question for those of you out there who have read Mr. Fuller's book, The Code, regarding the section on sex, but in particular marriage. I have not finished reading the book yet, but I'm going through different sections of it. And I believe in marriage and the family. But in the book, it talks about non-white people are not qualified to marry, neither can they guarantee the protection, assistance, and or material comfort that is necessary and or expected in the conduct of a true and or legal marriage, and that it's false for any person or persons to say or pretend that he, she, or they are or can be married and at the same time be subject to white supremacy. And I was just wondering in that, do you all find that section of the book to suggest that non-white people do not have weddings, or is it something that you understand to be the effect of have some sort of alternative for it, like let's say having a ceremony but not making it subject to the legal system of white supremacy, and as far as maybe you have your own ceremony and get it notarized? Because I've heard someone offer that as another option to, have your union outside of the system. I wanted to know if any of you had any thoughts or feedback on that.
I believe that I think I've had this conversation with Mr. Fuller before, and you can go through the you can go through the process still of getting a marriage certificate and if you have to take a blood test and go through a ceremony and everything, but you do so knowing that you can't ultimately provide the same levels of security that a white person can.
Yeah, I understood that under the system. It was just, hearing the perspective and the way that he presents it. It was just, I was grappling with it. Like, is he saying just, meet every now and then with who you like and have sex and not marry or make a commitment, or
No, I believe I've just finished his book not too long ago, and I read that section, saying as I am legally married to someone. I think I see that section as more of there's a lot of identifying you probably need to do before you choose to go down whatever route you do, based on how he kind of defines it and outlines it. In my opinion and personal experience, I'm not going to necessarily tell people to not get married. I would say there's a lot of questioning that needs to happen before you enter into that level of a relationship. And I think what happens is if you don't do that or aren't aware enough to do that questioning before you actually get to that stage, I believe it leads to a lot of problems that could then end up leading to what is one of our biggest statistics of divorce. Because a lot of those things you can figure out earlier on, and then you'll make agreement about it and say, we all agree to follow these rules, and if any one of us breaks it, then we just walk away and go in a different direction. And I don't believe there's a lot of maturity on the level that we do that before we enter into a marriage.
Right. There's only one. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
The only other place I've heard someone mention in particular for black people in the United States alternative forms of unions or marriage was in a book called Breaking the Curse of Willie Lynch by Alvin Morrow. And in that, basically it's supposed to be a process of reconditioning ourselves away from the psychological trauma and conditioning that's come as part of the Willie Lynch slave psychology. But in it, he does address black male and female relationships. It's Chapter 14, Empowering Black Relationships. And one of the things he does talk about is redefining marriage for ourselves. And I did think it was really cool to know that if you if you get married, let's say in the state that I'm in, you get married here, you want a divorce, you have to go through their system. A judge decides how things are divided up between you, the children, et cetera, all that. So you're giving them power over your life should that union break up. And his suggestion was that you can still have your own ceremony wherever you want, however you want, but without paying fees for their licenses, doing it through their system, as long as he suggests you photograph it and videotape it should you ever need proof that, you made a union, you created a union, but to also have it legally notarized, but it's still not going through their system in the same way as if, you had to apply for a license and justice of the peace and all that. I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Oh, no, I'm sorry, ma'am. Finish, please.
Oh, no, go ahead, Mr. Nero.
No, I was just going to say, well, you did say notarized, which is a, legal process.
Right, but I think in that way, I don't want to go through and read the whole chapter, but I think something about the way he presented it made it where, okay, wait, here it is, I found it. Okay, he says, what we are witnessing is a state organization controlled and operated family management system which stems from early North American slave economics. Today, the average American citizen is affected by the state-controlled marriage contracts designed to capitalize on and foster broken families, creating a multi-billion-dollar divorce industry. A government-monopolized family law industry cannot function profitably without divorce mediation through legalized state authorization. This whole process is morally contradicting. Marriage is a sacred act through which people swear by God that they will remain in a relationship for better or for worse, but at the same time before a state-appointed judge mediating the act. We live in an era where the church is supposed to be legally separate from the state. Based on the methodology of Willie Lynch, these laws do not empower the men in the economic outcome in divorce, which means that they are crafted to indirectly disempower the black woman. He says marriage contracts should and can be designed privately by the two individuals involved. Private marriage contracts can be drawn up between each party consenting to all terms and clearly providing a complete disclosure of assets sealed and approved by a notary public. If not, the marriage contract is possibly subject to be overturned later. Marriage contracts must be honored in the courts even if the standard marriage license method is replaced by an alternative method. Contracts of this nature have not only empowered both parties during a possible dissolution of marriage, but have brought a better understanding of the terms of their expectations of one another, a process that teaches the practice of compromise and negotiation before entering into a long-term commitment. And he says these types of marriage contracts are essential if black men and women are to acquire enough power to gravitate toward the influence of our own system of relating to each other without the influence of our oppressors' children.
I just wanted to hop in. We're back, so Non-Mighty Wick and Christy should be able to participate at will if you all want to comment or talk or what have you.
Just to respond to some of the things you read, what I have observed with, especially with black males and black females in relationships, is that whether you go through that process or not, or you alter it in some way, or you go through an alternative, method, you're still, in my view, at least that's what it seems to be, is that you're going to have what I call a hack relationship. And that's just the acronym that I use for hostile and combative. I just think you can expect a certain level of that in a relationship with a non-white person, no matter what the arrangement is.
So do you feel like those relationships are worth pursuing or endeavoring?
Well, apparently, it's just it's a need, like food or water. It just seems to me that, a relationship is also a need. It's there's a need to find, someone to, a consort.
Right.
So I think it's a basic need. I think that's one of the reasons why they focused, why the race is focused on destroying that relationship. Because as long as that basic need is not met, everything else is out of whack. Basically, I feel it serves you to go into the relationship knowing that we're going to have some problems. We're going to have some issues. Most of the time, they're probably going to be minor little things that irritate each of us because of the system that we're dealing in. And, we're not properly venting, or we're not properly, sharing how other little things are bothering us. And I go back to that bottle scenario where, we all have a bottle, and we're stuffing things in that bottle. And, if we're not emptying that bottle from time to time, eventually it just pops on somebody.
I think that it would help, since a lot of us are still in churches, if when they talk about marriage, this is just in any area, if they actually address the system of racism, white supremacy, but I can't say I've really heard it touched upon in all of my years of being in a church, but since that's where many of us are, that'll be one of the most effective places to address it, but I don't see that happening. Unless maybe it's in Jeremiah Wright's church, which he doesn't pastor anymore, but yeah, I don't see it happening in too many churches, unfortunately.
My suggestion, and I'll make sure I preface this by saying I'm not in a relationship, so you might want to take this with a grain of salt. And anything else I say, you might want to take that with a grain of salt. As a victim of white supremacy, I don't even have a phone. One of my observations has been that non-white people tend to conduct themselves very differently with white people as opposed to non-white people. I believe Josh Wickett, he talked about this as well. He said that non-white people, we will break our neck to be on time for white people. And then when it's a non-white person, it's, whatever, I'll get there when I get there. I have seen that play out specifically, and I think it causes a lot of problems specifically with the way that non-white people talk to white people and the way they talk to non-white people. We tend to have not too much a problem getting loud and rowdy with another non-white person, but we get really meek and really make an effort to watch our tone and the way we put our words together with white people. I think if we could be more consistent, more courteous with the way that we talk to non-white people, that would solve a lot of problems. Relationships all the way through. If we could be much more consistent with the way we speak to non-white people, white people, that would be fantastic. It shouldn't be anybody in a system of white supremacy where none of us, the non-white people, none of us have any authority, any power. White people disappear. Now it's only non-white people, and I sound like I'm the king of the world. That just shouldn't be happening. That would be my suggestion. Really make an effort to be consistent, courteous with the way you speak to non-white people, white people. See if you can even get as close as possible to make it sound the same so that there's really no difference to the way that you speak to people.
I think that's a good suggestion. I have definitely experienced non-white people talking to me in ways I know they would not talk to white people, and doing it in front of white people at that.
They expect to hack relationships.
Did anybody the last question that was fielded by Dr. Kellina Craig-Henderson, the last question, has she ever been sexually involved with a white person? And she said she dated a white person in college. Did anyone think that was significant based on what they heard during the broadcast?
Yes, I felt it was significant.
Yes, I do too.
If so, why?
I think that experience may have influenced her in the question that came before that when it was asked about, these relationships working to eliminate racism, white supremacy, and her reply about people who just happen to fall in love. Because whether you just happen to fall in love, as they say, or whether you made a deliberate decision to seek someone out, to seek a white person out, you're still going to face the same consequences and the same ordeals dealing with racism and white supremacy because you live in the same universe and under the same system. So whether you happen to fall in love with someone or whether you make a deliberate choice to seek out a white person, it's still a political choice, the relationship. It's still everything that the others were. You're still going to encounter the same thing. You still would likely have a problem being honest in the relationship and discussions on racism, white supremacy, and happening to fall in love with a person who is a possible racist will not change the fact that they probably practice racism, white supremacy at some point, and you will be victimized. So I feel like there had to be that, making space for one of them that could possibly not be incorrect, for a scenario where it wouldn't be an incorrect arrangement.
I think even for that scenario where, if using the terms happen to fall in love, there's a ton of choices that go involved with that. So, it's not a stumble upon and all of a sudden a person's in love or something.
Right, you don't slip on a crack in the sidewalk and just fall in love. You make a choice to spend time with the person, talk to them, get to know them, date them.
The live stream is going to end in about 8 minutes. Again, if you have Skype, I can most likely hook you up. Just email me your Skype handle, and I can have you participate in the program if you want to listen or if you want to talk. There's one line, like I said, if you want to call, one line if you want to call in, 347-215-6071.
Yeah, I certainly agree with your assessment. We all politicize our sexuality. There's things you will do, there's things you won't do. And so, it is politicized, so I don't know how she throws in, but you fall in love. So, I thought that was odd that she would bring it up after, talking about politicizing the relationship in the first place. So, as well as she did not agree with, well, I'm not sure. Did she agree with your definition? Because I was a little sketchy on
that. She said a system existed and it was global, but she raised issue with the term non-white, but she understood the logic of why I used that. And then she raised issue with dedicated because she said she felt that there were a lot of white people who benefit from uphold the system of white supremacy, but they are not consciously being racist white supremacists. But those were the only issues she had. And I think she prefaced all that by saying that she would agree. But those were the only two issues that she raised. I think she used the term she would refine those two aspects.
She specifically mentioned some white people who benefit from the system but are oblivious to it. Unless their children are mentally handicapped, I don't think there'd be too many that benefit but are oblivious to the system.
She did say she admired who was an admitted racist white supremacist.
Say that again?
I'm sorry, I just said that I believe I heard the guest today mention that she admires Joe Fagan, who is an admitted racist white supremacist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she did say that. That's the second time a non-white guest has come on the program and expressed their affinity for Dr. Fagan. I don't know what that means, if anything.
They should listen to the broadcast with Joe Fagan.
Yeah. March.
I wonder.
I'm sorry, Justice. Go ahead.
I wonder why she admires Joe Fagan.
Good question. We should write that one down. We'll try and get her back for October. Write that one down and ask her what is admirable about Dr. Joe Fagan.
Yeah, I'll write it down.
Thank you, ma'am. The people on the line that heard Dr. Fagan, did you all find him admirable?
I think if I recall correctly, I could have this wrong, but he was trying to be unnecessarily confusing to a very young caller who had called in. He was wouldn't even be straight up with him. That wasn't that admirable to me.
I remember him using the term recovering racist. I remember that. I think Mr. Nero called him on that. I don't think that's being as accurate as we can be in the system of white supremacy to say that you are a recovering racist.
I don't think I found.
Go ahead, Mr. Nero. Go ahead, Mr. Nero.
Oh, no, I just want to say, I don't think I found any of your white guests to be admirable. It has been refreshing when some of them have been honest about things. But I wouldn't even, I wouldn't call that an admirable thing, them telling the truth about it. So I could definitely be wrong about that, but that has not been my view of any of your white guests.
I think for victims of racism, that comes from that need to find a white person who isn't a racist. So when we hear them say something that seems to expose anything about racism, or for them to say they're fighting white supremacy, we kind of held them up as a hero of one of the good, magical white people, that we can admire or look up to or hold as the exception.
I must admit, I definitely appreciate Dr. Kevorkian's honesty in regards to the movies that he breaks down, especially considering how often we're in front of the television or a movie screen. So,
Here. He'll be back Saturday. I forgot all about that. He'll be back on Saturday, August 7th, 12 p.m. Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Central. He'll be back. We will not be doing any movies. We will be doing Ralph Ellison's The Invisible Man. That is one of my top 5 books of all time. I'll share my top 5 really quick, but I want to make sure before the live stream ends, you can hear Mr. Nero in about an hour. He will be a guest on Cree's show, Counter Racist, Evolving Engineer. It will air at 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central, and 5 p.m. Pacific. Cree and Mr. Nero will continue to examine the words each has used in recent broadcasts in their effort to help advance codification, the best way of saying and doing, in order to solve problems without creating others in the process. This episode will be co-hosted by Sonny. That's today, Blog Talk Radio, Counter Racist, Evolving Engineer. But yeah, Dr. Kevorkian, he will be back Saturday. Invisible Man, one of my favorite books. This is like the 4th time I've read the book. It's chock full of racism, white supremacy, their cowbells, the whole 9. Yeah, it's just incredible. I cannot wait to break it down. I think it's one of his favorite books too. My top 5. I'm not a fiction reader, but I just noted this because I knew I was going to share my top 5. My top 5 is saturated with fiction, which I find interesting. Top 5 would be, in no particular order, George Orwell, 1984, Dr. Francis Cress Welsing, The ISIS Papers, Ralph Ellison, The Invisible Man, Ayi Kwei Arma, 2000 Seasons. I hope I am pronouncing his name correctly, but 2000 Seasons, man, incredible book. I would highly recommend folks check it out. He is from the area of the world known as Ghana. Extraordinary. All about white supremacy, man. Let's see, there was 1, 2, 3, 4. Our Sister Killjoy. I'm going to botch her name, so I'm not going to say it. She's also from the area of the world known as Africa. Extraordinary, all about racism, white supremacy. Phenomenal read. I would highly encourage folks to check it out. And Marimba Ani Yurugu. I have 6 books in my top 5 because I couldn't decide, so I have 6 in my top 5. But those are my top 5, and only Yurugu and the ISIS Papers. Those are the only nonfiction works there.
Have you ever thought about doing a review of The Coldest Winter Ever by Sister Souljah?
I haven't, because I haven't read that book. I've read No Disrespect, which I really enjoyed. I've been working codified games I've been working to try to get her on the program, but she is a hard female to track down. But, yeah, I've read No Disrespect, which I thoroughly enjoyed. I have not read Coldest Winter Ever. I've heard lots of good things about it, though.
I think I've heard someone suggest her as a guest for the show before. Have you been able to make any contact with Sister Souljah?
Am I being heard? I've been trying to contact her, but she is
you said another name. You said Codified Games.
Yeah, I said he's been asking me to get her on the show.
Oh, okay.
Sorry about that.
Okay.
Yeah, he said he's been requesting that I make an effort to have her on the program for a long time, and I have emailed, I have called, and I have emailed. She is a hard female to track down.
Maybe if a lot of us contacted her, she'd cave in. She knows she's in popular demand. There's an audience waiting to hear you.
That might be the way to go. That has worked before. Where people have changed their minds because listeners also called and said they would be interested in hearing from them. So that might be what to do. She has a website. You can go just Google her name and her website will pop up. She has her email there and all that good stuff.
Didn't Bill Clinton throw her under the bus?
Yep. Yep. Yeah, which helped him get elected. What you call it? He was on the show twice. I'll get it. Kenneth O'Reilly. Dr. Kenneth O'Reilly. He talked about that in his book, Nixon's Piano, where he was breaking down how every single president has practiced racism, white supremacy, and he listed that as one of the ways that Bill Clinton supported the system of white supremacy by dissing her. And he did it at an event that I think was hosted by Jesse Jackson. So it was like he got two for the price of one. He got this Jesse Jackson and Sister Souljah at the same. He said white people were just elated, like that really helped his campaign. They said it was just a brilliant move. He breaks it down in explicit, very white, refined detail in Nixon's Piano.
There's a radio broadcast that come on out where I am called the Hutchinson Report on Saturdays, and yesterday they had a show on. There was like a on the radio. What do you call it? What is that thing? Town hall meeting on the Tea Party, and are there elements of racism in the Tea Party? So they had a white male on from the Tea Party. I can't recall his name right now, but they were in the midst of having a rally, and they asked him, "Would you be willing to wholesale denounce Breitbart, the guy who, brought up the false charges on Shirley Sherrod, et cetera?" And he said no, and then went to defend him, even though, he presented partial information. And then this guy even reiterated some of the same, excuses that the guy made, claiming that people in the audience were agreeing with her for mistreating someone based on their skin color, being white. It was just like more delusional stuff, but it was pretty interesting to hear callers call in. One lady, I think it was Miss Hernandez, she was so angry she pulled over on the freeway to call, and she ripped into him and let him have it about about how the Tea Party is racist, and over again she's seen them, practice racism toward non-white people. So if you all want to look up the Hutchinson Report, I think they have a channel on Ustream as well. But it'd be pretty interesting regarding recently non-white people denying that there are racist elements in the Tea Party, and throwing the NAACP under the bus to be able to listen to that show. I found it pretty interesting. The callers were not having it. He went after Al Sharpton, too, and then NAACP.
If you all want a sad fact, well, I don't know if it's sad. I think it's sad. It is sad. It is sad. A sad fact. Dr. Frances, and I was really proud of this. Dr. Frances Cress-Welsing was the previous record holder for the number of live listeners that I've had tune into a program, and it was the program that went simultaneously with the Super Bowl, right? I was so proud of that. Like, yeah, we went head up with the Super Bowl and set a record for live listeners. France Kebro broke that record. He is the new record holder for live listeners for a program on the cows. Like, man.
something about the name France. And the Caribbean, too.
Yeah.
You know what I noticed, and I don't know if it's something cultural around there. I don't know, but I noticed a great amount of black people from the area known as the Caribbean who participate in interracial relationships, and those that do seem to me to disproportionately represent those non-white people who will vehemently defend white people. And I don't know, it's just like this skill I notice among those from that region that do it to completely dismiss anything regarding racism or anything that white people have done to harm non-white people. I don't know if it's something in the culture from that region, but I noticed that more so than I do here. And I noticed them also basically like getting on black people from the United States as far as, the whole, well, I did it, you can do it too, you should be doing better, as stop playing the victim, that sort of thing. I hear that from them a lot.
I want to make sure I remind folks as well. Boondocks, this is Sunday, August 1st. This should be the last C.O.W.S broadcast on the Boondocks because there are only 3 episodes left in the season and series of the Boondocks, so this should be it. Unless they do something really crazy during the last 3 episodes. But last Boondocks program this evening, 2 a.m. Eastern. 1 a.m. Central, 11 p.m. Pacific. Again, this program is going to air before the Boondock comes on the West Coast. So if you would like the link so that you can see the program before the C.O.W.S goes live, shoot me an email untiljustice@gmail.com, and I can get you the link so you can watch it and be up to speed. I haven't even read anything. I just know that tonight's broadcast of the Boondocks will be worthy of analysis because they are doing a parody of, if you all remember when Oprah Winfrey made, I guess, some sort of deal with Kentucky Fried Chicken to give out a free chicken dinner, and it caused all this chaos. They're doing a parody of that, and they have previews up so you can see what it's going to be. I didn't watch any of it. I'm going to watch the episode and then broadcast to give my analysis, but the frame that I saw, it had a black male holding a bucket of chicken at KFC, and another black male came and tried to snatch it out of his hands, and a chicken wing flew up in the air, and that I didn't even watch anymore. I just left it at that and said we'll do a final word on the Boondocks this evening, 11 p.m. Pacific. Yeah, that's the Boondocks new episode.
Do you think that the Boondocks has served to maintain or further white supremacy, or do you think it's done anything constructive to fight against it?
Maintain, yeah. I think as long as the system of white supremacy exists, I think all non-white people, directly or indirectly, are doing things to maintain the system. So yes, even this program is doing things to maintain the system of white supremacy. I think I'll try and make sure I have this put together nicely for tonight's broadcast. I think that it reminds me, the Boondocks, the television program I'm talking about specifically, not so much the cartoon strip, but the television program, it reminds me of the Chappelle Show. It reminds me of Good Times, where these television programs, black people came up with the idea for these shows, and it started out with noble intentions, and they wanted to talk about racism. They wanted to address white supremacy in a really candid and courageous manner and highlight some of the problems that black people are experiencing because of white people. And you see a lot of elements of that in the show. But as with anything in the system of white supremacy, white people directly and or indirectly exert a really corrosive impact on the television show as it continues, and it just ends up being way, way different than what the intention of the broadcast was. I think this happened with Good Times. Irritated Genie talked about this when he was on the program in May, where JJ's character just becomes the total clown, minstrel. They kill off James. The same thing, I think, with Dave Chappelle, where he, I think was attempting to do comedy that was addressing racism, and it ended up, I think, where he said, the quote where he made it really elegant, he didn't, I think he said it was something to the effect of, I didn't know if I was dancing or shuffling. And to me, that just, it resonated, what he said. And I think the Boondocks, I think the same thing might have taken place. You have white writers and white people who are in charge of Sony and Cartoon Network where it airs. It just looking at the way the programming has changed over the seasons that it's been on the air, I think white people have altered the content, altered the message, altered the writing so that it's doing more to support the system of white supremacy and less to work against that system and expose it accurately. That would be my view, and I think tonight's broadcast will evidence that, and I think the other program that I want to talk about, The Lovely Ebony Brown, which aired a couple weeks ago, I think that also evidences that. But yeah, I'll try and make sure we're real articulate on this tonight. I know the listener in the Bay Area, I think she watches the Boondocks. Do you have a thought on that, on the Boondocks, if it's supporting white supremacy or working against it?
I was just still contemplating that question. I think it supports it in a lot of ways, and I also think it still brings attention, to people who are a little more confused. I think in some ways it gives them a little light bulb to say, oh, maybe I should look at this area a little differently. But for the most part, I think it supports it. Otherwise, it really would have been taken off the air a long, long time ago.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think it seems to me from my observation that almost anything that black people start or come up with that has involvement of white people or financial support or backing from white people eventually does become corrupted from its original intent, including the NAACP, which actually was founded by white people, and they ran it for the first 60 years. It was all white leadership, other than W.E.B. Du Bois, but he wasn't in a, position of a president or whatever. But even to this day, I can see the effects of it in that. I was wondering to the caller from the Bay Area what you thought about Essence Magazine recently hiring a white female to be the editor. I keep hearing two different departments. She's either over she's the beauty editor or either the fashion editor of the magazine now. And I wanted to know what you thought about a white female being in that position over a magazine that's supposed to put black women first.
It doesn't. I think I was last Saturday. I remember you being on, and you mentioned something about the Boule. I remember that. And I went and did a lot of research on it this week. It doesn't surprise me that magazine and who runs it and owns it and started it and that whole piece would put in 2010 a white person over any area of that magazine. It just reminds me of BET in that either way, so long as it has backers from some way and so long as, that group of black people is getting the benefits that they need to get or want, it just doesn't surprise me that they would do that. And to an extent, it just shows me where Essence has gone over the years, especially since I've looked at it again more recently. I haven't read it in a while, but I looked at a magazine more recently, I think yesterday. I can't remember who was on the cover, but I was just flipping through the articles and different things like that, and remembered how much of a pivotal figure it played in my life and who I wanted to be for a long time, and to look back at it again yesterday after, becoming a little less confused. I don't feel that magazine at all is any constructive at all, and it frankly is just sad to me.
Yeah, I'm not finding it to be very constructive either, and I have a subscription. But if you want to see, I guess, just an exhibit of how unconstructive it can be at times, I suggest looking at the June 2010 issue with Taraji Henson on the cover. Now, everything on the outside is no indicator of what's inside. It's stuff like your summer best, love your curves, hot hair, sexy skin. But when you look inside, almost every article that features a black couple gives you the subliminal message that black relationships can't work. Somebody will either kill the man or both of them, or it's a gold digger sugar daddy relationship where, it's incorrect behavior like women giving themselves sexually in exchange for things or money. And then there's a black female who is in a so-called marriage with a white male. She has a child from that marriage, and she complains that people always accuse her or assume that she is the child's nanny. I think she wears a shirt that says, "I'm not the nanny," or something like that. "I'm her mother." And then there was a thing on fathers, on black fathers today, and one of the couples featured in there was a black male so-called homosexual couple raising children. And I just thought to myself, being that black women are complaining about not having enough men to marry and have as partners, I think the feminization of black men, including homosexuality, is a factor in that problem. So why present that in a magazine to black women to celebrate fatherhood between two homosexual black males? That's a representation of part of the problem. But yeah, they're owned by Time Inc. now, so yeah, I feel like there's definitely room out there for other magazines for black women, whether it's in print or online. But we could definitely have more constructive things out there.
With regards to black females, that's going to be a big portion of my commentary on the Boondocks this evening. If anybody that's at a computer terminal, you can see the photo images that I selected to promote tonight's program. Just look at those images and, see what you think. But that's going to be a major part of my commentary, the Boondocks depiction of black females. I also related Bay Area caller. I spoke with her earlier this week, and she was talking about the film Diary of a Tired Black Man and the black male who is responsible for that film. His name is Tim Alexander. I spoke with him yesterday, and he should be coming through on the C.O.W.S sometime in August. So we'll be able to chat it up about a Diary of a Tired Black Man. If you want to share any thoughts about that, Bay Area caller, that film.
Oh, that film. It was very hard to watch. It's actually come. I have Netflix, so it's come up on my queue quite often. Because I try to watch a lot of things that are done by black producers and whatever. And I finally watched some of it, not all of it, but a good portion of it last weekend. And what I was talking to Gus about was that movie documentary. It's kind of a mix of both. It was very upsetting for me to watch it. It makes sense in the system. It constantly perpetuates the fact that we cannot survive in relationships together. There's nothing but conflict in our relationships together, whether the man is a good man or not a good man. There's just constantly conflict no matter what. And to a point where I think one of the black men in the movies, because there's part of it where it's actually scripted and there's parts of it where they actually go out and interview people in the community. And one of the black men was saying, well, you black women doing this, that, and the other, that's the reason why you'll see me walking down the street with a white girl next. And there was that part of me that was like, oh, I have to turn this off, and the other part of me that was really watching it just to kind of say, one, I understand why it's playing on Stars, very regularly on Stars, but two, it just kind of added to that whole piece of, I was watching it trying to figure out how would I have to explain this to somebody else, another black person. We were sitting here together watching it. Most of the people I know, and me probably 8 months or so ago, would co-sign with half of what was said in there. And it's just an interesting thing, and I can't wait for him to be on the show to ask him questions about it. Has anyone else watched that?
I'm sorry. I am so sorry.
Have you seen that?
I've seen the movie. I have a copy.
So and did you purchase that copy when you were less confused? I mean, when you were more confused?
Absolutely.
Okay.
In fact, I left a legacy of confusion on his forum.
What did you say, Mr. Nero? Can we get some snippets?
I would love to know.
What did you say on his forum?
I got banned. Tim Alexander banned me.
Why did he ban you? What were you saying that, needed you to be banned from the site?
Oh, man, I basically attacked his faith. At the time, I was so anti-Christian. But if you can go,
they play a lot of that in the show, in the movie too.
If you can go to his if you can go to his farm, you may be able to dig up some. He, if I can remember correctly, he may have put it back up because the farm went down for a while and it came back up. But I couldn't find it. Is it back up? I couldn't find a lot of the links. But if you can go back to some of the older links, I think back to 2008. And I did actually a pretty good post on, because a lot of black males were talking about going to Brazil and, other areas of the world to bring back wives. And I actually did a post, and I'm sorry, I'll just kind of say it a different way, but I basically created a post called Big D Dexter. You just have to use your imagination for what the D means. And went on about how they're going to go choose a woman out of their league and how she's going to basically get snatched away from them. But so some of the posts are actually, interesting. But basically, Tim Alexander booted me off for making comments about his religion.
It'll be interesting.
So he and I go way back. Interesting film. It is an interesting film.
It's a very interesting film.
It's an interesting film. And even though, I'm not going to spoil the ending for people. Did you watch the movie all the way to the end?
I did watch it all the way to the end. I was actually very surprised about the ending.
Okay, yeah, I won't spoil it.
After the preceding portion of it, I was like, what? Really?
Yeah,
you did all of that for that?
Right.
But I think what I found most interesting was all the commentary, even from the black women. And then there was older couples who have been married for a long time. He kind of touched on a lot of different groups of people, and it was just really interesting. I think that's probably the most profound piece, was watching the documentary more side of it, was hearing what live people had to say. There was a lot of people who went back and addressed their Christianity with it. I'm a godly man, so I understand this is my role and whatnot. And if women understood their role in the godly sense or the Christian sense, this is what they would do. But there was a lot of men who were like, it was just in all kind of places, and it was just hard to watch. Very hard to watch.
Interesting. Yeah, it's definitely an interesting film, and it exasperates. Or it's maybe, I don't know, maybe that's the female he dealt with. But Yeah, I would recommend that people see it. In fact, I may have to pull it out and watch it again because I'd be watching it through a different lens.
Yes.
But that was back when someone was just introducing me to Mr. Fuller's work and as well as Dr. Wellesley. So that may have been maybe '06. Yeah, it may have been 2006. Oh, maybe '06, '07 when I was on Tim's forum. My name is Lance on the forum.
Okay.
If you ever go to the forum, if you ever dig up some of the old pages, my name is Lance on the forum. And I know some of the people that were there back then are probably still posted there, like Doc and who else had been there for a while? Oh, you may have to ask him, if someone calls in, you may have to ask him about Black Men Vent, because that group actually, if I can remember correctly, kind of formed from his site.
Wow.
That group, Black Men Vent. I think they have a website where they basically, vent about black women. But that, I believe, that grew out of Tim's forum.
You can find people from that group heavily represented in gender wars that go on YouTube.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, these brothers are great with Photoshop. They did an image of they did an image on Tim's site, which got some of them banned, where they put his face in a big jar of red Kool-Aid and called it Simp Aid.
Wow.
I mean, it got really rough on his forum. So he had to ban a lot of people. I will certainly tune into that show, Mr. Renegade, but I'll be on my best behavior.
Oh, that's funny. That's funny. Got banned from the site. Wow. I'm looking forward. I hadn't heard about the film. I don't think. The Bay Area caller, she brought it up to me. I was kind of ignorant, but yeah, I'm looking forward to watching it, having them on the program. Should be a hoot. I don't know. It just seems like we don't generate the black male groups or black female groups that want to vent about white people. I always find that very interesting. That come up with groups to complain about everything but white people.
Exactly. I guess there are less immediate consequences to complaining about victims and going toe-to-toe with victims instead of the white supremacists.
I suspect that is true. Sorry, did I interrupt you?
No. I was speaking of that, I had that conversation earlier today with my uncle, who was a black male, and trying to have that conversation. I forgot how we got started on that conversation at this point, but he essentially asked me, he called me a racist. Because I decided I forgot how we got on topic, but he ended up calling me a racist.
Dang. What was your counter-racist response? What was your
My response was to stop and say, let's define racism. And then, and I did. And then my other response was to say, because how I logically have played this in my mind, is I then took each group of people of color that I can think of from around the world, and I asked him, let me know if in any of these categories, if these people have not been subject to that system based on my definition. And he agreed, no, they all had been. And I said, okay, so how can I be racist against those other groups if we all have had this issue from white people. And so, and you know, it kind of just stopped right there because we went off into other topics. But that was my whole counter-racist spot, was think about it. If I'm racist against another black person, then I was like, how can I be racist when you look at all areas, 9 areas of people activity? How am I subjugating and abusing all of these people in this essence? And so, and he just has to think about it. I let him sit there and think about it. And so, that was my only response at the time, to think about, this is how I can best present this to you. To say you have to think of it on a bigger scope than me just saying something. Because what he posed to me also was, if a white woman was sitting here, she'd call you racist. And then that's how I got into that whole spiel. And yeah, that's where it started. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Thumbs up. Thumbs up. I like that. Go right to the definition and make a victim of racism think. Love it. Love it. Love it. That's interesting that he was, that almost sounds kind of sad that he was relating to a white woman. Like, wow, if a white woman was here, she would say,
he is sad. He has dated a white woman for a very long time, and we have had this discussion, and he has said, because he claims he doesn't support the system and maintain the system. I said, yes, you do. And I said, and we got into his interracial relationship. He dated a white woman for a very long time, and he will count and say it with no problem. Hands down, she was the best woman he ever had. And I said, and that is why I will classify you as sad, and I gave him the definition of that, and he, of course, disagreed with it. He just thinks she was a good woman, whatever. So, yeah, that's how we have those conversations. But yeah, it's interesting.
wow.
And then we got into a whole tidbit about Tyler Perry dressing like his grandma. That's why I ended before the show started today.
Wow. That,
yeah.
I feel like that image for today's program, that's probably one of the best image graphics I'm most proud of, getting that image together, because not only she used those exact terms, she said the black male, said Linda Carter specifically, and the Boondocks. Grandpa just said that on the Boondocks. He wanted a white woman like Linda Carter, and she said predator, and that's dreadlocks. That is a black male. Man, oh man. Mm-mm-mm. Wow.
And you know what? Growing up as a little girl, that was my icon, was Wonder Woman. It was the Supergirl underoos, but I always thought of them as Wonder Woman underoos.
Mm.
And I have a picture of me at 4 years old with my Cleopatra braided hairstyle with the beads at the end, and my Supergirl Wonder Woman underoos flexing my muscles.
Wow.
But I used to watch that show all the time. Yeah, that was the female superhero of the time.
Yeah.
Wow. I must admit, I too was a fan.
Everybody was. Everybody. How could you not? How could you not? I remember Superman. I remember specifically the Superman with Richard Pryor. I mean, you talk about contrast programming. They have white guy, Superman. He can fly, save the world, and then they got a Richard Pryor, and he's just a total clown buffoon, and that's a ding, ding, ding. And I think that's Superman 3, but I mean, man.
I remember going to the drive. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
I remember going to the drive-in movie theater with my mom and my neighbor friend who was also a young black female and watching Superman, and I had a crush on Christopher Reeves after that. Definite programming.
Wow. Wow. Now, it was bad enough. Linda Carter playing Wonder Woman was bad enough, but have you ever seen her in a movie called Bobby Joe and the Outlaw? I mean, it was bad enough seeing her in Wonder Woman. But in that movie, Bobby Joe and the Outlaw, there was some very graphic scenes. I mean, she actually in the 70s they made some rough movies in the 70s that were pretty much borderline porn.
Mhm.
That was one of them.
Almost all of Pam Grier's movies.
Exactly.
Shaft as well. Even the names like Shaft, like that is just crazy. I think I might be a moron, but just the name Shaft, which Jan Nettervan Peterson, he had a portion in the book. I don't know if I read. I read it on the show Friday. I was on my grind, where he talked about in South Africa they would make these. I think they called them super spade films, where it would show like these black people doing all this crazy stuff and just way far removed from the reality of so-called apartheid white supremacy in that area of the world. And I was like, man, that's Shaft, Superfly, that's all the films that they dumped on us in the 70s.
You know what? I wish today's guest had gone into a little bit more detail about her experience in Israel and the difference in treatment of black people there. Didn't she say she had just come back from Israel?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
And I remember after Congresswoman Cynthia McKinney's trip over there, the first time they tried to deliver aid to Gaza, she was arrested, and you can find a video on YouTube where she's calling from the jail there, and she's saying that the majority of women in the prison in Israel are black women from Africa who were told that they could go to Israel by the UN for political asylum and whatnot, or as refugees, and because Israel never obeys any of the UN laws, like they're above it, they don't have to obey UN laws, so they just put the women in prison. But I know that, and then as well the Ethiopians that they migrated there, most of them are in menial jobs or in the military. They have been referred to as niggers and definitely treated with white supremacy. They, I think, don't allow them to donate blood because the white Jews there don't want their blood. And I think they have also, the white people there have been protesting having Ethiopian children and Muslim children in school with the Orthodox children or the Hasidic children. So it's very much an apartheid state. Funded by U.S. dollars. Sorry.
I remember when Cynthia McKinney was on the broadcast, and the letter that she wrote when she was in greater confinement there, where she talked about how the prisons were incredibly black. She was only here for a short time. She was here in January, but I believe she did touch on that a tad. Hopefully we'll get today's guest back, Dr. Craig-Henderson, when that book comes out in October, and we can get her to share a little more. Looking forward to that.
You know, I think it's really, for me, it's constructive to hear black females talk about experiences and racism more, because what I'm noticing, we hear about black men's experiences, and a lot of black females can't always relate because we're not victimized in the same manner as black males are because of the fact that we're female and there's that sexual element for white males. But I think when you hear a victimization from a female's perspective, I mean, I already get it, but I think it would be helpful for some female victims of racism to realize it's not because black men are intrinsically, criminal or just prone to be at the bottom, but there is an active system and people waging war against all of us, male and female, so it's not just our men or our sons and brothers and fathers. It's not because they're male and they're just lacking something. But it is because they are black and you are black.
I would agree. I find that insight very important. I think for a long time I think black women have a wonderful tendency to, and my situation is work, and the situation of work and things, to just kind of write it off as something else. That person's just rude, that person's just shy, that person's just whatever. And what I've found, especially since I've kind of been more note-taking kind of on behaviors that I noticed that for the black women that I'm around when we're in situations with more white women, there's a lot of smaller things that you're forced to do and have to deal with. Like I was in a training for a week, and I constantly was forced to have to, my boss is a white woman who kept discrediting what I was saying despite the fact that my experience was experienced around the staff that I have. I'm the manager of a group of people. I sit in their seats when they're not there. She has never touched their seats when they're there. And also my staff more recently is more of a staff of non-white people. And it's been it was interesting sitting there watching her and me have to banter back and forth with her about how I was correct, how I was right, and why I was right. I had to do that for 4 days. And she would also do it to the other non-white woman that's on my team and to the non-white male that's on my team. And I think by the end of the week I was ready just to walk out because I was like, I keep trying to be very constructive in my way of responding to you, and I was very courteous, and she would just get more upset. And it was just an interesting, but in the end, at the end of the day, I still have to take care, I still have to take care of whatever it is I'm supposed to be responsible for. But it's just that kind of, I think for us it's a little more, it can be big at sometimes, but in other ways it's a little more subtle, and I think black women tend to write it off a lot as other stuff. Like you were saying, the whole sexual piece. Or they just are doing that because I'm a woman. It is not just because you are a woman, and I have sat and watched it in the office. And that's my easiest explanation.
I think in the interaction with so-called law enforcement, my experience has been, I know that they harass black men, but, learning the difference for me was when I got pulled over once, and he could have impounded my car. He specifically said to me, if you were, and the violation was a felony, which I had no idea that I didn't know that. No drugs or anything like that, but just, naive, something I did. And he says to me, if you were one of those hip-hop guys, I would have impounded your car. Hip-hop guy? You mean a black male? I didn't say anything, but I was so concerned with, oh, God, I hope he just writes me a ticket and lets me go. But I drove away and thought about it. I was pretty furious. He was bold enough to state that basically if you had been born as a black male, you wouldn't have a car right now. But because you're a female, I'm just going to give you a ticket. And I think there are certain things that we as black females get away with. Not that it's like a blessing or anything, but there's certain things that are done to black males that are not done to us because of our gender. Not that we aren't still victims, but a lot of us don't understand that they are much more dedicated to more violent abuse and vicious abuse of black males. And they're a lot more blatant with it.
Double whammy.
Exactly. And I think if we understood that, we might be a little less harsh in our criticisms of black men as far as, how come they can't have no job? They always in jail and, all of those things that we tend to do or say. Yeah, maybe I'm going to have to blog on the increasing numbers of black females in the prison incarceration in the prison industrial complex.
there will be lots more black females coming through this week and this month in general. I'm super excited. Deborah Willis, Black Venus 2010. She's at University of New York. She'll be here at the end of the month. Sister Nefertari, Mary Moot Nzinga, she'll be here on Friday, August 5th. Pam, one of the co-authors of Trojan Horse, Death of a Dark Nation, she'll be back, second visit, on Thursday, August 4th. I have to look at the rest of the schedule, but yeah, there's another black female too. There's quite a few of them coming through this month, and this week in particular, quite a few of them coming through. So more black females. And Justice, you want to give your email address?
Sure. justice.asap@yahoo.com. Again, justice.asap@yahoo.com.
Did you want to share any thoughts about our guest for today's program, Dr. Craig-Henderson?
She had a lot of constructive information. I will ask that question when she comes on the show again. And I did write it down already. So yeah.
Counter-racist homework assignment for anyone. If you have time, if you're in the films, and I assert entertainment that is, I think, short of sexual intercourse, that is the racist, white supremacist, second most powerful weapon, entertainment. I think she commented upon how we don't read, we just sit in front of television. I think that is especially the case for black people, unfortunately. Watch He Got Game. Even though Spike Lee directed it, watch He Got Game. The arc of the story is pretty much black males leaving non-white females and getting with white women. That's pretty much what happens all throughout the story. With Denzel Washington's character, he kills his black wife, who is very light complexion. She's very pale. He kills her, is in greater confinement, and as a result of killing his wife accidentally in a domestic dispute, he gets out of jail to assist suspected racists. They let him out of jail, and he ends up becoming sexually involved with a white prostitute and working to rehabilitate her and get her back on her way. His son, who's played by Ray Allen in the film, ditches his non-white female, who's Rosario Dawson, ditches her, and he goes off to these college visits where part of the enticement is to have sex with a white woman. Real interesting. He Got Game, Spike Lee's film.
Well, I'm going to sign out so I can get ready for my show with Cree.
Outstanding. 10 minutes. They're airing right here on Blog Talk Radio. Thank you for your participation, Mr. Nero.
Thank you. Valuable information that you shared in regards to the relationship dynamics. Although we don't agree on a lot of things, I do feel that some of our information was very helpful.
For sure. Have a fantastic broadcast with Cree and Sunny, sir.
Oh, thank you, sir. Take care.
Yes, sir. Context of white supremacy. I hope folks will be switching over and get a whole day of counter-racist broadcasts. Cree is coming up next. We'll be back later for the Boondocks. Non-white people constructively focused to replace white supremacy with justice as soon as possible. We have like 9 minutes left in the broadcast. I will take this opportunity to let people know. She's not on the phone anymore, but Christy, I was speaking with her yesterday, and actually I won't spill the beans about her aspect. I'll let her, because I'm talking to her about coming on the program to share herself. So I won't tell you what she said, but I will tell you that I don't believe in coincidence. I do not believe in luck. I don't believe in coincidence or accident. It was perfect. It was meant to be. I had been thinking that out of all the we're about to hit 200, which is crazy. No phone, no computer, and we're about to hit the 200th broadcast of the context of white supremacy. I suspect it's looking like it's probably going to happen somewhere during the end of summer blackout. It might be Irritated Genie or Umar Abdullah Johnson. It looks like it's going to probably be one of those programs will be 200. But I was just looking back over all the programs that have been done and saying, man, we've covered all the areas of people activity, and I stopped and said, that's not really accurate. We have not, or I have not done broadcasts focused on war. And I think that is a major deficiency. I think the fact that I've done almost 200 programs and none of the programs has focused specifically on the area of war, I think it speaks volume to the lack of balance on the non-white team. I am indicative of that. The programming is indicative of that. And I think that is a major deficiency amongst non-white people, an extraordinary deficiency. So in a compensatory manner, what I'm going to attempt to do is to make one broadcast per week that is exclusively focused on war, counterviolence in the system of racism, white supremacy. I feel it's very important because I think non-white people are not comfortable. We're not comfortable. We're not codified to speak about counter-violence in a system of racism, white supremacy, and I think that that just needs to be corrected. I think it's important to be balanced. White people, racist white supremacists, they talk about war, and they talk about it all the time. They put it on the front page of their newspapers. They're very comfortable having discussions about the use of violence, very comfortable discussing war and making plans for war. Non-white people, we need to compensate. I think a major part of our victimization is viewing that as a total anathema. To even think about counterviolence against white people is sinful. I mean, that is just the worst possible thing in the world, and I want to do my part to correct that and just to get non-white people more comfortable with the idea of counterviolence and not just being rowdy and ineffective, but able to do so in a codified, constructive manner. I'm not quite sure when it's going to start, but whenever it does start, the effort will be once a week, and we're not talking about anything else on those programs except counter-violence, but that is coming.
I definitely feel we need to discuss that. That is one of the elephants in the room we always seem to be afraid to touch, and I think especially after the so-called civil rights movement and the whole nonviolent protest campaign, I think that had a lot to do with it as well.
And religion.
Yeah, that as well.
And religion is happening, yeah.
But have you noticed we don't mind talking about violence when we're talking about our enemies, supposedly Bin Laden and Al-Qaeda? But we have a problem speaking about it when it comes to enemies we can identify and who we can document have done things against us.
Oh, yeah. People that white people talk about being violent with, we seem a lot more comfortable once white people have said they're going to get violent with this person. We seem to be a lot more comfortable just co-signing on it and said, oh, yeah, forget that person, which I have noted. Anytime a white person starts speaking out against a non-white person, that's pretty much a green light for non-white people to mistreat that person, too. But yeah, that should definitely be counted. We should be working to get much more comfortable talking about, thinking about ways, and if it is possible, would be constructive, the use of counter violence. Just being able to talk about it. Again, not saying you need to go out and do this today, but just being able to talk about it and view it as an option. It should be on the table, and we should be able to talk about it as such. So we'll be making an effort to compensate for that. One program per week devoted solely to counter violence in the system of white supremacy.
Do you also think that black people in particular seem to be against gun ownership or have more of a fear of it than white people do?
Yes, resounding. Yes. Man, it was. Oh, you said you disagree?
I disagree.
Oh, okay.
Only because I only say I disagree because most of the black people I know, I had them in my home up until recently. We had some, and I was taken to the gun range and the whole nine. And I know quite a few people who don't mind having them in there, who are non-white, who are okay with having them in their home. What I think is the problem is that there are more of us who legally are not allowed to have them, is my thought. But that'll come out in the shows, and I'll be proven wrong, maybe. Because I have asked for one on many occasions, a smaller one, and it's just the cost. I have to go research. But I feel like there's just a lot less of us who are legally able to have them.
Okay.
That's just my thought.
That whole No Guns for Negroes campaign that white people have taken up through laws and things like that.
I think also a big part of that is we're not very codified with regards. I think that's why Plaxico Burr's black male, he's in jail right now, not being codified with regards to handguns and weapons and such. I think a whole lot of us end up getting in trouble around that. It seems like every day. Yep. Every day somebody getting in trouble.
Wayne.
Yep. Every day.
And understanding the laws around it. Like I had to do a whole bunch of research from my husband on the open carry law in California. That he didn't even know the open carry law was in existence and what it meant and where it was and the whole nine. And I had to go do a bunch of research with it, which led us to asking police officers their opinions of it. And I went online, and there's a whole group of people in Northern California white people, of course, who do walk around with theirs on their hip. But they're